Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, inshallah, we shall talk about the kingdom Protista, or the Protist kingdom. Last time we talked about the two bacterial kingdom, the prokaryotes, the archaebacteria and the eubacteria. And today we shall talk about the Protist kingdom. Thereafter, we shall talk about the fungi, the plants, and the animal kingdom. So what exactly is a protist? Well, a protist are eukaryotic living things. Bacteria, if you remember, they were prokaryotes. That is, they did not have, for example, intracellular organelles, membrane-bound intracellular organelles. Protists, on the other hand, are legitimate, honest-to-God, eukaryotic living things. The other aspect about protists is that they're a whole bunch of medley, eclectic living things. There's no typical protist. I mean, for example, if I tell you a bacteria, I try to imagine a bacteria, you have a certain conception of what a bacteria is, right? Even though there's some variation in the bacteria, right? We talked about there's a bacillus and the bacillus variety of bacteria, and they're stained differently. There are some spiral-shaped bacteria. So, nevertheless, there's some substantial degree of similarities between different bacterial species. So when I say bacteria, you have a certain mental picture of a bacteria. But protist, on the other hand, there's no such thing. If you tell a protist, I mean, like 100 different things come to mind, and you'll see, and they all look so different from one another. There's no one good way of saying, oh, this is a protist, these are all the characteristics of all protists, because that's just not the case. Because of this, they have been, in general, difficult to classify, but we can say a few things about them. One, of course, is that they are eukaryotic. So, other than that, there's no typical protist. Some of them are unicellular, some of them are multicellular. Most of them are unicellular, but many of them are multicellular. Some of them are autotrophs, others are heterotrophs, and yet others are decomposers. So there's some autotrophic protists, and there are some heterotrophic protists, and there's some even decomposers. Now, if you wanted to classify these protists, however, we can do that and divide them up into three different categories. Precisely, we can say there are some animal-like protists, and there are some plant-like protists, and there are some fungus-like protists. So that's reasonably convenient. There's some animal-like protists. We call them, they get the name protozoa. They kind of like the cool name they inherit from the name of their kingdom. So these are animal-like protists, or sometimes affectionately called them protists, but then they might be, that notation, that name might be offensive to plant-like protists, who are called algae. This nomenclature has always been evolving, and there's been some debate as to exactly what to call them. But nevertheless, they're animal-like protists, or protozoan, that's a category. And then they're plant-like protists, they're called algae. And there are fungus-like protists. Well, to understand this, you have to understand, what does it mean to be an animal? Well, what do animals do? Animals eat. So, it's like a lion hunts, right? A tiger hunts. So animal-like protists, these protozoan, they eat other things. We'll see. And amoeba goes in, engulfs in other little Paramecium. They eat like animals. But they're unicellular. What kind of an animal is like unicellular, right? You know what I'm saying? So they're animals, but they're unicellular. Then plant-like protists, as you can imagine, they are photosynthetic. They are able to carry out photosynthesis, that is, use light energy to produce energy-rich compounds. But then they have no organization or complex structures or organ systems like plants do. There are no roots, there are no flowers, there are no stems, there are no leaves. Plants, as you will see, are reasonably complicated living things. So they're animal-like protists that eat other things, and they're plant-like protists that are able to do photosynthesis but without the complexity or organ systems of plants. And finally, they're fungus-like protists, and just like the job qualifications of the fungi, they're decomposers. But, unlike the fungi, which are stationary, they move at some point in the life cycle. They're little critters that move along. And you've never seen a fungus walking about, right? It's like that. So even though they're decomposers, they're not stationary decomposers like the fungi are, and structurally, at the ultrastructure level, they're very different from fungus as well. Nevertheless, we can divide these protists into these three categories. They're all eukaryotes. They're animal-like protists, the protozoans. They're plant-like protists, and then they're fungus-like protists. The subject matter is sufficiently broad and substantial that we should today, in fact, only cover the first category, that is the animal-like protist. And inshallah, next time we'll talk about plant-like protist and the fungus-like protist. So today, we should be talking about these living things. They are of particular interest to us because they're reasonably common throughout the world, including the amoebas and the sporozoans, or the bug that causes malaria. So today, inshallah, we shall talk about animal-like protists. In this category, we shall introduce ourselves to 4 different phylums. The amoeba, the phylum Rhizopoda, and then the flagellates. You'll see these are little flagellates over here. These are the Zomastigia, the ciliates, the Ciliophora, and the sporozoans, the sporozoans over here. So these are the 4 categories of animal-like protists that we shall talk about today. Let's begin then with the amoebas. See, amoebas are very cool because you can find them in freshwater ponds and across your probably street and something like that. So they're very, very common. They got this amorphous shape, and they move about with these pseudopods. Pseudopodia, like this, the word pseudo meaning false or fake, pseudopods, they're like false feet because they're always changing. So whichever way they want to go, that's where the pseudopods kind of extend. And they're not as amorphous as you might think because they have a nucleus with the nucleolus, as you can see, eukaryotes. They have mitochondria, they have food vacuoles and a central contractile vacuole. This feature, the contractile vacuole, is very important, as we'll see with many of these creatures, because if they live in fresh water, they have to have a sump pump, and that's the function basically of the contractile vacuole. So this is an example of the amoeboid protozoan. The fascinating thing about these amoebas is that they're able to move, and the movement is actually seemingly semi-purposeful. In other words, they move towards their prey. Here's an amoeba, for example, in the black and white picture over here. He's almost like trapping this Paramecium, which we shall study in a little bit. So here's another one here, is going over there, and slowly moving about stealthily, and the Paramecium is kind of unawares of it, and then before it knows it, it's trapped. And then what it does, once it traps the Paramecium, is basically engulfs it and brings it up in its tummy. This is particularly a big Paramecium compared to this. And then, so it does endocytosis, or phagocytosis, this is called. It means to eat by engulfing the whole thing. And then it squirts its digestive enzymes in this vacuole of its to form this digestive vacuole of Paramecium, and it eats the Paramecium, and that's all the nutrition it needs from this bug. So that's how they work. Now the question is, you might wonder, right? It's how does it know which way to move again? It has no brain, it has no eyes, right? It's like a little cell, seemingly having a purposeful movement, right? So the way this happens, presumptively, is that, see, Paramecium, all living things, they have waste and stuff. So they constantly throw things out, they garbage out. So does the Paramecium. So Paramecium, secretes things or excretes things in its immediate environment, and whatever is being excreted or secreted, the amoeba is able to sense that. So here's a pseudopod, and it has these sensors or receptors for whatever small molecules or chemicals that Paramecium might be secreting. So it knows, and then it is able to extend its pseudopods towards that direction where the chemical is. So it extends the pseudopod until it catches its prey. Then you say, how does it know how to extend the pseudopod? How do the pseudopods work? Well, how do the pseudopods work? Pseudopods are basically extensions of the microorganism, and what happens is the shape of the organism changes because of its cytoskeleton changes that occur. That is, every cell has a cytoskeleton, if you remember, made up of filaments, like microfilaments, right, or microtubules. So all of these cells have microtubules as a cellular internal skeleton. So what you do is, it's whichever way it wants to go. Let's say this, it wants to go this way, right? It wants to extend its pseudopodia over there, right? It extends the internal cytoskeletons in that direction, and the cell gets enlarges over here. So it goes like this and makes it bigger. And this is because the cytoskeleton is made of subunits, smaller particles like this. So it keeps adding particles in that direction, and that's where the pseudopodia would extend. Well, where do these particles come from? From whatever they're not necessary. So if it doesn't want to use this pseudopodia, it extends all those cytoskeletal micro subunits towards where it's needed. Well, how does it know it's to go over there? Well, whatever the small chemicals are, they attach to the receptor, right, and they activate certain internal enzymes, right, so allowing things to accumulate over here. So it's all a matter of chemistry. So it's not like this amoeba is thinking, oh, there's a paramecium over there, guys, let's go eat. It's not like that. It's based on microchemical environment of the living organism. Some amoebas, they can have a shell. These are called foraminiferans. Okay, so or the other variant of this, these are radiolarians. In other words, this is kind of like Iron Man type costume that they put on themselves. So they're internally they're pretty soft amoebas just like that, and then on the outside they put on this tough shell that they have. And then there's obviously these shells have little holes in them, so they can extend their pseudopodia to those holes. So they're not 100% surrounded by their armor, so to speak. So these are amoebas. Some of them can have a shell. So amoebas typically reproduce by asexual reproduction. That is, they kind of like do the binary fission like bacteria can do. So those are the phylum Rhizopoda, or the amoeba, the category of amoeba. The second category are the flagellates. Flagellates, as you can imagine, they have a flagella, as you can see over here. And flagella is a pretty remarkable structure. They're like a little motor going on over here, which kind of makes this thing kind of swirl like this. This is an example of a Giardia lamblia protozoan, which is found in fresh water, right? So if you go swimming like in a Fox River or something, you might if you drink some water or some from Fox River, you might swallow some of this Giardia lamblia here. It looks kind of cute, right? It has these little eyes and face like this, and those are nuclei, I believe. And then it's got this flagellates over here, which allows it a certain movement. This one causes diarrhea. So, and different as you recall, they can have different protozoans can have different number of flagella. So Giardia lamblia is an example of a flagellate. Then there's this third category of the protozoans. There are the ciliates. Now the ciliates, the cilia are tiny little things. Our bronchi, air spaces have cilia, right? They're the ones that allow us to take our debris and gunk stuff from our lungs and eventually cough it up. So these are cilia. Now this over here, this paramecium, this is what the amoeba was eating. So the amoeba was eating this paramecium. So in the other couple of slides ago, so they're tiny little cilia. They allow movement of this little micro unicellular organism. So this paramecium is a ciliate because it has cilia all around it. And over here, actually, there's cilia all over here. As you can see, this is called the oral groove. It's like its mouth. It's a very fascinating thing. It's one cell, but it's got a little mouth over here, and it's also got a little poo-poo area too over there. In other words, that's where the digestive food vacuoles come out over there. Now what happens is these cilia, they kind of create a little mini current over here. So whatever's surrounding over here kind of goes over here. So if there's a little tiny bug or whatever it wants to eat in this immediate environment, it goes over here and bug meaning other unicellular tiny things. It's bacteria, and it brings the current, brings it over here, and then to the oral groove in the mouth, and then it comes over here, and it creates what's called, it eats it up, brings it inside the cell, and it creates a food vacuole which has digestive enzymes and to digest, and this vacuole continues over like this until all the digestive material is absorbed, and whatever's not necessary, it poops it out in this and it excretes over here. In addition to this area, it has these contractile vacuoles, the sump pump. There's two of them actually. Parameciums have two of these sump pumps, and they're extra cautionary. They don't want to get the basement wet, so to speak. So they have two contractile vacuoles. They also have two nuclei. One's called a macronucleus, and the other the micronucleus as well. So these are paramecium. So if you look at closely, you can see the sump pump in action over here. See? Let's see if we can find. There should be another one at the other end. It's moving pretty fast over here. That's the groove, oral groove, I think, over here, right? So anyway, so this is a example of a paramecium. It's a funky cartoon. Sometimes I wish I were a paramecium. That would be great. But then I think about all those cilia covering the outer edge of my pellicle, and I totally freak out. The pellicle is actually, it's like a little cell wall in addition to the membrane that the paramecium have, which I didn't talk about. And so, by the way, I found an encyclopedia on the beach. It was an ineffable read, he says. Also, I found a thesaurus. This guy ends up being funny. Anyways, so last approaches that we shall talk about are the sporozoans, and this is of particular interest to us. Malaria, the bug that causes malaria, is a sporozoan. Malaria it's not caused by the mosquito per se. Mosquito is the vector. In other words, mosquito is an intermediate host of this parasite, the malaria parasite, which is called the Plasmodium. So Plasmodium malaria, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium falciparum, which is the worst of the Plasmodium species, are the protozoan species that actually cause malaria, and mosquito and human beings are what's called intermediate hosts. It's kind of like we are like their apartment and their condo. They live in us for the particular life cycle. So malaria is as endemic in these areas that you see over here, and those are the red areas is malaria infested, so to speak. There's a lot of malaria in those regions. The United States, as you can see, is relatively free. That was not always the case, in fact. Up until the 1920s, there used to be quite a bit of malaria even in the United States. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control, that's where this stuff comes from, apparently. This slide comes from. The Centers for Disease Control, CDC, was established, in fact, to fight malaria in the United States in the 1920s. So there was quite a bit of malaria, especially in the south of the United States, and eventually we got rid of it by draining millions of acres of swamplands and drying them up so the mosquito don't live in those areas, and using pesticides also, like various pesticides to kill the mosquito, like DDT and things. So the United States had a substantial problem with malaria at one time that we got rid of it, alhamdulillah. Malaria is Italian for bad air, malaria, which means as mal as in mild digestion, or malevolent, bad, aria mean air. So malaria just mean bad air. And it was start like in 1700s, like early 1700s. They figured out that it's more common in swampy area. So there association was made between swampy area and malaria, but not necessarily with the mosquito. That association was made later by this gentleman named Dr. Ronald Ross is his name. He was in India. Apparently worked in the Bombay Medical Hospital in the last part of 1800s, and he actually had malaria, and he discovered that the mosquito was the vector for the malaria. So what he apparently did is he asked for or paid apparently people who had malaria to have a mosquito bite them. He put the mosquito on their skin to bite them, and then he cut open, he dissected the mosquito to see if he could find the malarial parasites, and lo and behold, he found malarial parasites in these mosquitoes. But not all mosquitoes actually are able to act as vectors or as hosts for malarial parasite. Okay, not all of them are able to do that. It is only the Anopheles mosquito that does it. In fact, it is only the female Anopheles mosquito, this particular species of mosquito, that is able to infect human beings, and it is only the female that feeds on human beings, and the reason for that is in general these mosquitoes are vegetarians, so to speak. They feed on nectar and stuff like that. But when the female, when she gets pregnant, needs nutrition and proteins and stuff like that, and to support the mosquito babies in her tummy. So it's the female Anopheles mosquito that actually bites the human beings. So for this discovery, and because now you could do something about it, he got a Nobel Prize in 1902. So this is the Anopheles mosquito. Now we shall study the life cycle of malaria in a little bit detail, because it's of particular interest to us. And a couple of things you have to understand. See, here's an individual who is not infected with the malaria parasite. When an infected mosquito bites this human being, this person will get infected. Okay, and the life cycle of the Plasmodium malaria parasite is a protozoa, which is a protozoan. That's what we're studying. It is not complete. Okay, and a mosquito will bite again, and then the mosquito will be affected. It's the thing, we hate the mosquitoes, right? And then some mosquitoes are saying we hate the humans, man. They give us the malaria. So it's kind of like, it's mutual. Unfortunately, we better be careful before they wipe us out again. But anyway, so there are two different bites. So what I want to bring to attention is there are two separate bites. One bite that can infect an individual, like this, and a second bite that, when infected individual, can actually give the parasite to the malaria, to the mosquito, and this mosquito can go on affect obviously other individuals, right? Now, because when we study the life cycle like this, there's one mosquito drawn, but there are actually two separate events that will occur that you'll see. So we're going to talk about this particular slide for a tiny bit over here, because there's a lot going on over here. Some of this is harder for us to understand because you don't know some of the background knowledge that we need to know. For example, you got to know what the difference is, what a spore is. We briefly mentioned what a spore is before. Like a pollen is a spore, for example, in a way. So now compared to a living parasite, okay? So that's one thing. So what happens is this. So I'll take you through this in a little bit of detail so you can understand the life cycle of the malaria bug. So this is the first scenario over here. This is a healthy individual. Now it's going to be bitten by a bug, a mosquito that has the parasite. The parasite that this bug is carrying, the mosquito is carrying, actually lives in the salivary glands of the mosquito. Why does it live in the salivary glands of the mosquito? Because it likes the immediate environment. What is there to like about the immediate environment, the salivary glands? Well, most infections live in a certain area because of their peculiar biochemical environment. Maybe the pH of the salivary gland is conducive to the growth of these things and whatnot. I'm not a malaria expert, but I'm just telling you this how these things work. Now, what's the mosquito doing biting the human being anyway? We already said it's a female mosquito because it wants the blood of the human being. Why does it want the blood? Why doesn't it go feed on anything? Well, blood is, well, that's where the glucose is. You know, that's where our glucose is. That's where all the proteins are. So blood is like the highway of nutrition in the human body, right? So blood is where all the good stuff is. Of course, it's going to want to get the blood. I mean, it's like, you know, going to the getting a pop from the pop machine type of thing. Okay, so that's why it goes and bites the human beings and sucks the blood out. Right. So when this mosquito bites the human being, after the bite, you know, here's, for example, we get a mosquito bite, like a little swelling here, right? That's because when the mosquito bites, you know, it injects certain proteins and stuff over here, and we have a reaction. The proteins, whatever the foreign material that the mosquito injects over there, elicits a reaction in us, and we get a little immune reaction at the site. So the mosquito bite, okay, is an immune reaction to the proteins that were injected as a part of the feeding process of the mosquito. Now the mosquito is pretty smart. So our blood has a very unique property. Our blood is a very fascinating thing. Inside the circulatory system, it is a liquid. So our blood is liquid, right? It moves along. But as soon as you interrupt the integrity of the vascular system, in other words, as soon as there's a cut in a blood vessel, as soon as there's a cut in the blood vessel, the blood coagulates in the area. It means it forms a clot. So the mosquito is, if it were to dig its teeth in, so to speak, or proboscis is what it is, into the blood vessel, as soon as it goes into, the blood will clot in that area. So the mosquito actually has enzymes that prevent the blood clotting at the area of the bite. And that's what those proteins and enzymes are. So those, they actually prevent it until the mosquito has taken enough blood. It's really amazing thing. And then it leaves away. And then we have a little reaction at the side because of all the stuff that the mosquito squirted from his salivary glands, from his mouth, etc. And if this mosquito is infected, along with the stuff that the mosquito put in over here, some of these parasites will go and infect into the human being. Okay? Now, when these parasites, when they're infected, the protozoan parasite, the malaria parasite, the Plasmodium parasite. So the species that causes malaria is Plasmodium. I should have said that before, I guess. Right? So Plasmodium, the bunch of Plasmodium. There's one that's called Plasmodium falciparum, genus and species. Genus is Plasmodium, species falciparum. But that's the worst. Plasmodium falciparum accounts for apparently some 50% of the malaria infections, but accounts for 95% of the deaths from malaria. Millions of people get infected with malaria every year, right? And millions die actually. So the Plasmodium species. So when the malaria bug, the Plasmodium species, enters, it looks like little wormy things. These little wormy things are called sporocytes. These little wormy things are called, but they squiggle through. I mean, they go squiggle through in the blood like little tiny worms. Now you have to understand this life cycle is trickier for people to understand because these thingies, the spores, they change shape. Okay. And they become they look very different in different stages of their life, right? So, but it's the same species of Plasmodium, so sporocyte. Now these sporocytes, they're actually like haploid. They're like little spermy thingies. They're not spermy thingies. They're like sperm because they're haploid. But we'll see because later on we'll get the spermy male and female gametes. But right now, these sporocytes, they are haploid. So the sporocytes, they go and they're in the blood now, right? So the mosquito bits a person. Now these little swarmy little sporocytes, they're in the blood. Then they go and infect the liver cells. They actually go and burrow themselves into the liver cell, and then they rest and they divide in the liver cell. Okay, so that's the first stage. Now I mentioned here the sporocytes are haploid. Okay, right? and then they go on to become, they look very different. It's the same living organism can look very different in different stages of its lifestyle. It's kind of like you. And when you're a baby, you're different. You're a toddler, you're different. When you're a teenager, you look different. Being a baby, you're cute. You know what I'm saying? I don't think you describe yourself as cute now, but so we change. Just like we change, these living things can also change in the different stages of their lives. So all of these stages that you see in the human being, they're haploid stages. They don't have the genome. Okay. So what they do then is, in the liver cell, there's a whole bunch of these, and then they divide, and then they reproduce. But they divide by mitosis. They remain haploid. So they divide by mitosis. So they divide. This is a liver cell, and then until the liver cell burst. And when the liver cell bursts, they burst out of the liver cell, and what surrounds the liver cell is blood. So they go back into the bloodstream. So these malaria parasites, they go hibernate in the liver, and they divide a whole bunch of times, and then the liver cell bursts, and they're right back in the blood. All right. So this next series of clips here. Here's a malaria parasite after the mosquito bites, little wormy thing. See? And then it goes over here, and here's, look, watch, it's finding them liver cells. And then in this last picture, hold on for a second, the last picture, here it goes. It infects the liver cell. They're digging into the liver cell. Now you'll see the intracellular space. There's nucleus, mitochondria, whatever's in there, right? So that's what it's doing over here. So it infects the liver cell. Once it infects the liver cell, it divides a bunch of times, it doesn't. When it divides by mitosis inside the liver, it doesn't look like it's like this anymore. It looks like a little tiny thing. Now they're not called sporocytes anymore. They're called merocytes. So these haploid sporocytes, they divide by mitosis and they become like merocytes. They're still haploid, right? So, and this typically is like the incubation period for this bug. It's silent, and then now it's like in blood. See, from the liver, all this, they're back in the blood, right? So because surrounding the liver cells is all this blood, and then instead of going back into the liver, the merocytes, they infect the red cells, and the red cell. Why do they infect the red cell? One, because they need something to eat. Right, so the red cell is right there. Happen to be all the way. They're surrounded by red cells. So the merocytes just like they go inside the red cell. They dig themselves, and they love it there because red cells, it's got a lot of oxygen. It's got there's a lot of good stuff in there. So it's like it hit the jackpot. So once they go inside the red cell, they say, "Oh, where you been all my life?" type of thing. So they love it there. They hit the jackpot. And then they continue to divide in the red cell. The same thing. The one merocyte will give you the 20 merocytes, and then until the whole capacity of the red cell is exhausted, and then the red cell burst, and then all releasing these hundreds and thousands of merocytes, and then we go and infect other red cells, right? And then they infect other red cells, and all those red cells, then they divide a whole bunch of times into red cells. But remember, all of this is by division by mitosis, so they're still haploid, okay? And until then, they go infect a million. So you can see, after a while, you'll run out of red cells, right? That's absolutely true. That's what happens. So these people, they become anemic. After a while, they don't have any energy because their red cell count, their blood count is low. It's like they're donating blood type of. They're internally exsanguinating in a way. You follow what I'm saying? So the red cells keep dying. So, and then in fact, the time it takes for them to go from liver, and then they go infect a bunch of red cells, and they go in cycles like this. And since the mosquito bite happened, everything is cyclical because, the time it takes, how long does it take for a baby to become like a toddler for human beings? It's pretty much the same time for all human babies, right? And how long does it take for the toddler to become a teenager, right? So same time frame. That's why these bursting cycles occur in spurts, because they're following a certain life cycle of the merocytes, and that's why the symptoms of malaria are cyclical. Classically, the timing based on the original mosquito bite and the growth and reproduction and bursting of these red cells. Okay. Now what happens to the red cell once they die? Well, they get buried. See, there's a red cell graveyard. So all the leftover, the ghost of the red cell, they get buried in a graveyard. The graveyard of red cells in the human body is the spleen. spleen is where the old red cells go to die, and then the spleen eats it up and digests them. So in fact, you can imagine the spleen is like working overtime over here, right? You bet it is. In fact, so malaria people, their spleen gets very big. They get hyperspleens. Their spleen can be very big. The liver can get very big too, because it's like, inflammation is happening over there and cells invading. So they can have a swollen liver and big spleen, malaria people, and they have low red cell count. And the symptoms of fevers and chills, all those are cyclical, corresponding or coinciding with these bursts of merocyte activity. Alright, so the merocytes can keep doing that. It's not like our immune system doesn't do anything while all this is happening. Our immune system goes like in hyperdrive, try to fight this infection, and many times, in many of these species, immune system is able to actually cure people. So people can recover from malaria, especially if they get treated for it, and so immune system is working very hard. However, immune system could be overwhelmed, especially with the more dangerous of the Plasmodium species, the Plasmodium falciparum, and people can actually die from malaria. One of the things that happens is when the red cell is infected with the malaria bug, it becomes kind of sticky. It loses its beautiful, elegant shape and tends to get sticky with the lining of the capillaries and small blood vessels, and this can cause actually trouble with the blood vessels, and especially the brain. The brain doesn't get enough oxygen, and all these blood vessels are being messed up with. People can get brain edema and can have CNS brain symptoms. Okay, now so that's one of the other problems with malaria. So once in a while, after a certain number of cycles, after a certain number of cycles, some of these red cells, some of these merocytes, when they infect the red cell, when the merocyte infects the red cell, it doesn't go this way. It decides to do something else, because it's like, now maybe I'll do something different, right? Instead of going into this cycle, it matures. So instead of maturing like this and making more haploid thing by mitosis, instead of maturing, it does something different. It matures inside the red cell into female and male gametes. These are different. So it matures into, depending on in its DNA, it matures into female and male gametes. How do you know which way to go? Well, these sporozoites, these are haploid too. Some of them are male and some of them are female. So the ones that are male will mature into male gametes. The ones that are female will mature into female gametes. So some of these are like male type, and some of them others are female type. Okay, so instead of sometimes doing this, some of them do this, right? So they're still in the human blood. So in the human blood, after a certain number of days or weeks of infection, many of them are going through this merocyte cycle, periodically causing the person havoc. And many of these red cells, on the other hand, will have these gametes in there. So gametocytes, the male and female version of the malaria bug. So all of this is happening in the blood, okay? And then the second mosquito bite happens. Oh, well, here's got pictures. Look at this. Malaria bugs. So these are the gametocytes. You can identify them. And then you know what happens? So the second mosquito bite happens. Now this mosquito might or might not be infected. Okay, that's why I'm saying they're two separate bites, but we had using the same picture to explain two things. This mosquito might or might not be infected, but when mosquito bite happens, these gametophytes, along with them, they get eaten up. You know, it's like a straw, right? Straw goes, where is it going to go and go? It's going to go in the gut. Okay? This is the tummy. This is the mosquito's tummy over here. It go in the gut. And in the gut, see, the male and female, they mature and they come together. The male and female come together to give a zygote, okay, which is a diploid. So zygote. So the two gametocytes, they come together, and the sperm, so to speak, fertilize the egg, so to give a zygote. So in other words, thankfully, the copulation of the Plasmodium species does not happen in the human being. That would be kind of weird, right? well, we'll save that for some other bugs, but it does happen in nature, but not with the malaria. The malaria species, they don't copulate in a human being, thankfully. But the gametocytes, they're sucked up by the malaria bug and into the tummy. Why would you say it doesn't happen? Well, first of all, they're in a red cell. Plus, they're like going like, from their point of view, they're like going like 200 miles per hour. It's kind of hard to meet your spouse when you're going at 200 miles per hour in the blood, right? But anyway, so so they're in blood. So, but that regardless, that doesn't happen in the human being. When the mosquito eats, has its meal, they're absorbed into the gut, and the two gametes, which are haploid gametes, they mature into the zygote. Okay, then the zygote then tunnels inside from the gut and goes into the body. And as the zygote matures, now remember the zygote is diploid. As the zygote matures, okay, it undergoes meiosis. So this is meiosis. It goes meiosis and produces haploid male and female sporozoites. That's where the sporozoite is, it loves the salivary gland of the mosquito. And this mosquito again can go and infect other people. Right. So again, the life cycle of malaria is follows. The mosquito bites, okay, and the sporozoites, which are motile creatures, they go into the blood and they infect the liver. In the liver, they multiply, divide, and they break up the liver cell and explode, and they release merozyte into the immediate environment, which is basically blood. Liver is a very bloody organ. And then when the merozytes go in the blood, they love their red cells. They go and they hibernate in the red cells. Then they divide by mitosis, giving more haploid merozytes. And they keep doing it in a cyclical manner. And then some of them, after a while, mature into the gametocytes, the male and female gametocytes, and just sitting in the blood until another mosquito comes in and it's amazing. The mosquito, the life cycle of the bug is entirely dependent on the mosquito. If you were to stop the life cycle here, the gametocyte would never meet, and that would be the end of the species, right? So one way you can say if you eradicate the mosquito, you eradicate the species, right? Species of the Plasmodium bug. So gametocytes are then nevertheless taken up, and then they mate and they form a zygote in the mosquito, and then the zygote then divides. So this is a diploid state, and then divides by meiosis to give the new sporozoites, which can hibernate into the salivary gland until the next meal. So we talked about many of the symptoms of malaria already: the periodic chills and sweating, the cough, enlarged spleen, stomach, nausea, vomiting. Any illness can cause nausea. You can be sick from anything and nausea, vomiting. Muscle aches and fatigue and pain and fever. These reactions are called systemic reactions: the fever, fatigue, and this is a result of any inflammatory reaction. You could get an inflammatory reaction from anything and have fatigue and muscle aches and pains and headaches. So this is again another cartoon picture of something else. This shows you a kind of timeline. See, from the mosquito bite until the mosquito divides into the liver, it's several days. So a person typically may not have any symptoms, and when the liver cells start to die and stuff, then they can have symptoms. The liver enzymes can go high, and they can get jaundice, in fact, because the liver cells are dying, right? So, and then they go into this merozyte cycle where they infect red cells and keep merozyting. Every 43 to 40 hours, they get a new set of symptoms related to this phenomenon. But then some of them divide into evolve into the gametocytes, and this apparently will have to take 9 days or so. Some of them will be like this, and anytime after 9 days, if the mosquito bites again, these gametocytes then in the tummy of the mosquito can form a new zygote, and the zygote can develop into a mature zygote and give these new sporozoites, and the sporozoites can infect other human beings from this mosquito. And cause further disease. Quinine was the original treatment for malaria. It comes from a plant, Chicona plant, which was apparently first discovered in Peru. and the bark of this plant, and that's the chemical structure. And many of the like Philippine Island type stuff have this plant, and that's one of the reasons why we were so keen in the Philippine Islands in those days, in times of World War II and stuff, because many of those battles were fought for islands that grew this plant, supposedly. Now we have treatments for these, and Paramecium, chloroquine, and other anti-malarials. It's a very treatable thing, but the best way to treat the disease is to actually avoid the mosquito bite in the first place, mosquito nets. And there have been efforts actually to genetically alter mosquitoes, the male mosquitoes, so that they make them the X chromosome defective in there, so the female female mosquitoes don't survive. So there's an effort by at a genetic level to try to eradicate this species. Remember, it's this only one particular species of mosquito that causes this disease. So eliminating swampy land, eliminating the mosquitoes, and remains the best way of preventing the disease. And in fact, in the where these species are particularly prevalent, there are travel guidelines issued for people to prevent malaria infections in the first place. So today we talked about the first category of protozoans, a pretty interesting club of living things. As you can see, we talked about the phylum Rhizopoda amoebas, the flagellates, Zoomastocygnea phylum, and the ciliates, and the sporozoum, the Plasmodium species. Plasmodium. If you want to remember one species of malaria, this Plasmodium falciparum is the worst one, which causes, as I said, about 50% of the infection, but it is responsible for some 75 or 95% of the deaths related to malaria. Inshallah, next time we shall continue with the plant-like protist and the fungus-like protist. Until then, الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.